the known history of Iran, that was known as Persia until last century, starts about 2,500 years ago. But maybe we should say something at the beginning about the religion. Uh, uh, Zoroaster, Zarathustra, depends which country you from. The Greeks called him Zoroastris. Um, he's the prophet of the Iranian religion. We don't know exactly when he lived, probably 600 years before Christ. But then the Gathas, which is the oldest of the religious books, traditionally they are credited as being from dating from 1200 BC. So anyway, this religion was certainly around before Zoroaster. Zoroaster codified it as, in my opinion, the first monotheistic religion. There's one god, Ahura Mazda, and there's an evil power, and there's this cosmic battle between the good and the evil. So definitely a preview of Christianity. This was written in Avestan, which remained for a long time the language of the priest of the Zoroastrian religion. So that's a religion that was around. Oh, by the way, the Avestan is related, closely related to Sanskrit, which is also a holy language, meaning the language of the priests in ancient India. And also you can find the elements in common with the Vedic religion also in the Zoroastrian religion. Anyway, about 2,500 years ago, a little more, a man called Kyros in Greek, Cyrus in English, started the Achaemenid dynasty. That became probably the first real empire in the history of humanity, because unlike the Egyptians, it controlled different linguistic and ethnic groups. Certainly the biggest of its era. It reached the peak under Darius. And Darius is also the one who founded the capital, Persepolis. We call it Persepolis. Was called Parsa. And Persepolis actually remained unknown to the rest of the world for almost 200 years. That tells you that this empire is so powerful that foreigners couldn't know much about it. So the kings, emperors were writing in a different language that we call Old Persian. I think the Iranians called it Ariya. So that's the language that you find in clay tablets. So Avestan was only for the priests. If you go to the British Museum, check out the Cyrus Cylinder, which is the first document, first charter of human rights. Then there was Darius, the empire reaches its peak. That's also the time when there's the famous Battle of Marathon against the Greeks. It was the first Persian invasion of Greece. The Persian Empire had expanded to today's Turkey. They failed to take Greece. They paid a price later for failing, because now I fast forward 3 centuries. A guy named Alexander came from Greece and conquered the Persian Empire. Then Alexander died very young. One of his generals started the Seleucid dynasty, which we call it Seleucid, because the offspring of Seleucus, there was the general of Alexander. So that's the beginning of what the Romans called Parthian period, and at this point the two empires, the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire, expand to the point that they collide and they start having wars. The new dynasty is called the Sasanian dynasty, I believe from the 3rd century until the birth of Islam. And at this point they write in a new language called the Parsic language. It's a descendant of the lay language, not of Avestan. Avestan goes extinct. Okay, 640, the Arabs, Muslims invade, and they ban Zoroastrian language and they force Islam on the people of Persia. The new language is called Farsi, which is again it's a descendant of the Parsic, but written in the Arabic script. I think it takes a couple of centuries for the Farsi to develop. Something important happens at this time, at the very beginning of Islam. It's the schism, the big fight between Shiites and Sunnis, and this begins pretty much with the death of Muhammad, the founder of Islam in the Arabian Peninsula. It started with a dispute over who should succeed Muhammad, and basically the Sunnis supported Abu Bakr, general who conquered a lot of the original Islamic Empire, and then successors basically in theory based on sort of meritocracy. And instead the Shiites wanted the leader to remain within the family of Muhammad. So in particular Muhammad's son-in-law. And what happened next is that this Ali was assassinated in 661, and his son Hussein was murdered in a famous battle, the Battle of Karbala. So at that point there was separation of Sunnis and Shiites. At that point it was not that bloody, it became bloodier later. The Islamic Empire was still united under a dynasty called the Abbasids from the 8th century to the 13th century, and but the capital moved to Baghdad, and that's interesting because Baghdad was in the old Persian Empire, and so some people say the Abbasids was a Persian Empire. Just converted to Islam, and in fact if you look at the officials, even the intellectuals, a lot of them, perhaps the majority, were Persians. Then the Mongols came, the Mongols, the Timurids and the Ottomans. There were 3 centuries when Iran was invaded by these people of the Central Asian steppes. The Ottomans eventually settled in Turkey. The Mongols eventually went back, but this caused a lot of turmoil. Eventually, in 1501, a new dynasty was born, the Safavid dynasty, and that's when they decided we are Shiite, we are not Sunni. So then things started becoming a little more contentious between the Arabs, they were almost entirely Sunni, and the Persians, who became increasingly Shiite. And the reason was not so much the Arabs, was the Turks, the Ottomans. At that point, most of the Arab world was falling under the rule of the Ottomans. And and so there was the Ottomans and the Persians were the two big rivals in the Islamic world. Anyway, European colonial powers started moving in. I think Portugal maybe was the first one. Anyway, the important thing is that when Britain comes 1622, they take Hormuz, which is not famous for the Strait of Hormuz, very important trade route goes through that strait. The Ottomans started capturing more of the Persian territory. I forgot to mention how the Arabs conquered Iran. Probably was because of all the wars between the Roman Empire and the Persians. But anyway, at this point, 1,000 years later, the Persian Empire is declining because it gets attacked from multiple fronts. The Safavid dynasty is terminated, I believe, in 17 something, 18th century. In the 19th century, 1848, with there's already European interference, and when the 16-year-old Shah is installed in 1848, the Persian Empire loses the Caucasus, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan. Basically loses the Caucasus and Central Asia to the Russians between 1813 1881. Loses Afghanistan to Britain about this time, 1879 I think. There's a huge famine that kills probably more than 1 million people in the Persian Empire. At this point, the Persian Empire is really just a nation, and it's a nation that is increasingly under the influence of Britain and Russia in particular. In 1906, something important happens. 1906 is when the emperor, the Shah, is marginalized, and the first democratically elected parliament approves a parliamentary constitution. Now that's pretty amazing, because in that part of the world there was no democracy. There were just 1906 was still an Ottoman Empire, and at the end of World War I, 10 years later, 12 years later, that area would fragment into French and British colonies that eventually would become dictatorships, not even a hint of democracy. Persia had already a democratic constitution in 1906. The tragedy is that 3 years later, the British created the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, and that also oil is always a tragedy. That makes Persian very, very important over the years. Then there's a new emperor, Reza Khan, in 1921, that begins a new dynasty, the Pahlavi dynasty. And during this Pahlavi dynasty, Persia is renamed Iran, I believe in 1935. Then there's World War II. In World War II, Iran is strategic. Britain and Persia exert a lot of influence, increase their influence on Iran. At the end of the war, basically Iran is a British colony. Most of the people running the Iranian oil fields were actually Germans. That gets a little confusing, but working for the British. But anyway, at the end, the British basically occupy a big portion of Iran. They also get rid of Reza, and his 22-year-old son becomes the new Shah, Mohammed Reza. Now, up until this point, willing or not willing, Iran was an ally of the West. It was probably the most westernized country in the Middle East. And in fact, when Israel declared independence in 1948, when Israel was born and it was immediately attacked by the Arab neighbors, Iran recognized Israel. I think it was probably the only country in the Middle East to recognize Israel. And so Iran was very friendly to the West. In 1949, a politician named Mohammad Mossadegh formed the National Front Party. This party became very popular. It was a nationalist party, and he wanted to stand up to the Europeans, basically. In 1951, the Shah appointed him prime minister, and he had the idea to nationalize the oil industry that was owned by the British. Well, that lasted 2 years. In 1953, the British and American secret services, CIA and whatever, what's the British one, M16 whatever, staged a coup and removed the prime minister. So the Shah was at this point the absolute dictator of Iran. A very westernized ruler. In 1963, he launched the White Revolution that consisted in economic reforms that, by the way, paid off. I mean, in terms of just economic development, that's when Iran got modernized, and incidentally granted the Iranian women the right to vote, 1963. I don't know when the first Arab country granted women the right to vote. I mean, most of those Arab countries were dictatorships anyway, with nobody had the right to vote. So up until now, Iran is way ahead of its Arab neighbors. So the White Revolution, that's very interesting actually, because the White Revolution sounds like exactly what the young Iranians want now. Well, that's not what the Iranians wanted back then. The White Revolution was strongly opposed, in particularly by the clergy, by the priests, by the ayatollahs, and one of them was Khomeini, who eventually had to go into exile in Iraq, and so there were mass demonstrations. We don't know exactly how many Iranians were opposed to the White Revolution, but certainly granting rights to women was one thing that really angered a lot of Iranian men. And in general, just going against the principles of Islam. Back then it was the opposite of today. I can't believe that the majority of Iranians actually resented a westernized revolution that aimed at giving people more rights and downplaying the influence of religion, of Islam. Anyway, this led to the mass demonstration and riots of 1978. And here we have to stop for a second, and we have to remember, before 1979, Iran was a close ally of Israel, a close ally of the British, a close ally of the United States. In fact, it was the number one ally of the West in the Middle East. Israel had just survived 3 wars against the Arabs, and it was not the economic and military superpower that it is today. Well, in 1979, following of these mass demonstrations, there was a revolution, and Ayatollah Khomeini returned and managed to seize power. And that's the beginning of the Islamic Republic of Iran. By the way, it became an Islamic Republic through a referendum. Now, I don't know how many people voted in that referendum, but millions of people voted for Iran to become an Islamic Republic. So don't just blame the Ayatollah. The Ayatollah had the support of vast sections of society, if not of the majority of people. It's hard today to assess how many people voted and so on. Anyway, there was a referendum. Ayatollah Khomeini declared the Islamic Republic of Iran in a relatively legitimate way. Of course, in the West, nobody liked that. Iran went from being a friend to being an enemy. Now remember that the West had interfered in Iran multiple times. The Persian Empire had been shrinking because of all the wars with the Russians and with the Europeans. So, so there was definitely an animosity, legitimate animosity within Iran. In November 1979, Islamic students stormed the US embassy in Tehran and took hostages, and this precipitated the relationships between the United States and Iran. Even if there was somebody in the United States willing to recognize the new regime, obviously that episode didn't help. Worse, in September 1980, Iraq attacks Iran. Now, Iraq was ruled by a brutal dictator named Saddam Hussein. And believe it or not, the United States supported, the president was Ronald Reagan, the United States supported Saddam Hussein in this unjustified, unprovoked aggression of Iran. That's another thing that Iran did not forget. How many people died in that war? Iran says 1 million. So it was a bloody war. It lasted, I believe, 8 years. Worse, it gets worse. In 1988, for reasons that we still don't really know, an American warship shot a missile to a civilian airplane of Iran and killed all 290 passengers on board. Imagine if Iran did it to the United States. I mean, the animosity only increased over the years. Now, at the same time, the anti-Israeli rhetoric also increased. Now, here we have to go back. Why Iran became the main enemy of Israel? The Arabs tried 3 times to destroy Israel, basically, because Muslims believe that the land where Israel is should be a part of Islam, and the Jews are not, and the Jews shouldn't be there. I don't want to get into the 2 religions, what they believe and don't believe. In my opinion, they're both incredibly stupid arguments. But anyway, the Arabs tried 3 times to get rid of Israel, and they failed. Now, Khomeini, when he became the supreme leader of Iran, sort of used a marketing campaign. He said, well, they failed. They are Sunnis, they failed. We, Shiites of Iran, we will succeed. We will get rid of Israel. And then they started supporting anybody who fought against Israel. So Iran quickly became the main supporter of Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Hezbollah is a Shiite organization, and even of Hamas in Palestine. And Hamas actually is a Sunni organization. But Iran was so focused on getting rid of Israel that it would support pretty much anybody who fought against Israel. So anyway, 1989, Khomeini dies, and is succeeded by Ali Khamenei, the one that the United States just assassinated. Iran, so at this point, we are entering into the age of Islamic terrorism against the West. And just to clarify, Iran had nothing to do with this. In fact, in 1998, there was almost a war between Iran and the Taliban. The Taliban had installed a dictatorship, Islamic dictatorship in Afghanistan, but they're Sunni. And they hated Iran, which is Shiite, and vice versa. And in 1998, the Taliban killed, I don't know, many Iranians. When the Taliban conquered, now I don't remember the city, and it was a city, there was an Iranian, there was a Shiite community exterminated, there were Iranian diplomats and an Iranian journalist, I believe, killed. So they also, Iran almost went to war with the Taliban. That was 3 years before a terrorist from Afghanistan called Osama bin Laden, supported by Saudi Arabia, attacked the United States. So the Americans didn't even know that who these Talibans were and so on. Iran was already fighting them. The same happened later when ISIS, I'll get there. So Iran had nothing to do with anti-American terrorism at the time. Of course, it was the United States that messed up with the sent troops in that part of the world. And yes, Hezbollah, which is a Shia group supported by Iran, did kill the American soldiers in Lebanon. Anyway, 2001, Osama bin Laden, who is protected by the Taliban, funded by Saudi Arabia, carries out terrorist attacks in the United States. They killed 3,000 people. In 2002, George W. Bush gives a famous speech where he says there's an axis of evil. And one is the Taliban in Afghanistan, one is, North Korea, and the other one is Iran. So Iran was part of the axis of evil. It doesn't help with the relationships between the two countries. Now, as I was saying, Iran actually, nothing to do with the Sunnis, nothing to do with Saddam Hussein, nothing to do with the Taliban, and nothing to do with ISIS. I don't remember the year that ISIS was about to, when it started. But anyways, at one point, 2014, I believe, ISIS was about to conquer Iraq. There was nobody defending Iraq from ISIS, the Islamic State. And guess who defeated the Islamic State? It was Iran. Not directly, but Iran helped and supported and funded and armed, what was it called, the PMS, Popular Mobilization Front, Popular Mobilization Forces, and PFS in the English abbreviation. And who was the main architect of defeating ISIS? The cruel, brutal ISIS dictatorship, where the main architect was an Iranian general called Qasem Soleimani. Qasem Soleimani was assassinated by the United States when Donald Trump was president the first time. And okay, he was not a nice man. I wouldn't want him as a neighbor for sure. He did a lot of things that but anyway, that Iran was definitely not supporting the Sunni terrorists. It was fighting them. It was fighting them before the United States did. Trump assassinated Qasem Soleimani in 2020. Okay, now that said, that's how we get to our days. Iran has, over the years has experienced the interference of Western powers repeatedly, and it has fought back. And I am not a fan. The Iranian dictatorship has very few fans in the world, but within the Iranian society, there are probably many people who still resent the interference of the Western powers. Even when the West, the United States mainly, sends troops or bombs or does something against the regime of that region, of course Iran says, what if I did something in Mexico or Canada or Cuba? The United States would not be happy that a distant power comes to the neighborhood of the United States to assert its ideology, principles, economic interests, whatever. Well, that's what the United States does in Iran's neighborhood. So that is not to justify Iran's dictatorship, but just to put things in perspective. Why it was relatively easy for the Iranian Ayatollah to build up anti-American sentiment. That anti-American sentiment has shifted, has become the opposite among young people, at least young people in the cities. And so the Iranian regime is relatively weak at this point. And the animosity towards Israel really just keep building up, because it was like it became the existential mission of the Ayatollah. That's and of course Israel didn't help. Many of the actions of Israel have been condemned not by Iran, by the whole world, culminating with the genocide in Gaza. That said, again, I'm not a fan of Hamas, which staged a horrible terrorist attack against Israel. I'm not a fan of Hezbollah. That is, in my opinion, is the main reason that the beautiful country of Lebanon got destroyed. But you have to put things in context. I mean, this is a story that starts from a long time ago.